I was sitting by the window this morning holding this small tarnished silver locket that hasn't been opened in probably 20 years. The hinge is a bit stubborn now, much like I am. I suppose inside isn't a diamond or a ruby, just a tiny, faded, dark scrap of a lace ribbon from a wedding dress that saw better days. Looking at it, I realized how quickly the decades have slipped through my fingers. It feels like only yesterday I was worried about the color of the drapes in a house that was torn down years ago. If I hadn't learned what truly matters, what stays behind when the walls come down, I think I would have lost my soul to the clutter of life. I would have left this world empty-handed, and that is a terrifying thought. Before I tell you this story, please subscribe. I want to pass this wisdom down before I'm gone so you don't make the same mistakes I did. I want these words to live on in you in all my 82 years. I found that we spend the first half of our lives trying to build a name and the second half realizing that the name doesn't matter nearly as much as the echo it leaves in a room after you walk out. When Ely and I got married back in 1964, the world felt like it was spinning so fast. We were young, we were stubborn, and frankly, we were quite selfish. We thought a legacy was something you bought: a big house on the hill, a car with polished chrome, a retirement account that made the bank. Teller smiled. I remember a specific night in the winter of 1978. It was a Tuesday, and the heater in our little colonial house had given up the ghost. I can still smell the kerosene from the space heater. We huddled around in the kitchen. Arthur was hunched over the table, his face buried in ledgers, his skin looking gray under the fluorescent light. He was working 12-hour shifts at the plant, and I was exhausted from chasing 3 children and managing a household. A prayer. I snapped at him. I remember saying, "Is this it, Arthur? Is this the life we're building? Just grime and bills and silence?" He looked up at me and his eyes were so tired. He said, "Eleanor, I'm building a foundation. I'm leaving them something." "You're leaving them a ghost," I told him. It was a cruel thing to say. It was the hardest year of our life. We were so focused on the stuff of a legacy that we were forgetting the spirit of it. Young people today might not understand this, but back then you didn't just walk away when things got heavy. You stayed in the room until the air cleared. But that night, the air didn't clear. We slept in silence, back to back, with a cold wall of resentment between us. It wasn't until a few years later, during the economic crisis of the early 80s, that the lesson really took hold. Arthur lost that job he had killed himself for. The foundation he thought he was building crumbled. In a single afternoon, I watched a man who defined himself by his paycheck suddenly feel invisible. I promise you, there is nothing more heartbreaking than seeing the person you love feel like they have no value because their hands are empty. I remember walking into the backyard where he was sitting on an old crate, just staring at the dead grass. I didn't nag him about the bills. I didn't ask what the plan was. I just sat down on the dirt next to him. I took his hand, his rough, calloused hand, and I said, "Arthur, the kids won't remember the house. We might lose. They'll remember that you taught them how to fix a bike. They'll remember how you look at me when you think I'm not watching. That is the only thing that lasts." He looked at me and started to cry. It was the first time I'd seen him weep. In that moment, we stopped building a fortune and started building a memory. We shifted. We realized that our marriage wasn't a business arrangement to produce successful children and a paid-off mortgage. It was a garden, and you have to decide what kind of seeds you're dropping every single day, because those seeds are what grow into the legacy you leave behind. Let me tell you the truth. Experience has taught me that people will forget your titles. They will forget the brand of your shoes. They will eventually even forget the sound of your voice. but they will never ever forget how they felt when they were standing in your presence. My late husband used to say toward the end of his life, Eleanor, I'm glad we lost that house in '82. It taught me that I was more than a bricklayer. We spent the next 40 years focused on the soft things. We focused on forgiveness. We focused on being the kind of people our grandchildren would want to sit with, not because we had candy, but because we had peace. I remember a time in the '90s when our eldest daughter was going through a horrific divorce. She came home broken and ashamed. In my younger years, I might have judged her or worried about the family reputation. But because of what Arthur and I had been through, we just opened the door. We showed her that a legacy isn't a straight line of perfection, it's a safety net of grace. We sat with her in the dark, just like we had sat in the dark in 1978. But this time, there was no resentment. There was only light. You have to understand something very important. Love isn't a feeling you have, it's a decision you make every morning, especially on the mornings when you don't particularly like the person sleeping next to you. In today's world, everything is disposable. If a phone breaks, you get a new one. If a relationship gets difficult, people swipe for a replacement. But you cannot grow an oak tree if you keep moving it to different soil every time the wind blows. A legacy is grown in the wind, it's grown in the struggle, it's the scar tissue of a marriage that makes it strong. When I look at this locket, I don't see a piece of jewelry. I see the fact that Arthur and I chose each other 10,000 times, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Patience is a word that seems to have gone out of style, but it is the heartbeat of a lasting life. You have to be patient with the process of becoming who you are meant to be. Sacrifice isn't about losing yourself, it's about trading something small, like your ego or your pride, for something massive, like a 50-year bond that can withstand the grave. Young people, listen to me. I know you are told to chase your dreams and find your hustle, and that's fine. But don't let your hustle outrun your heart. Don't build a life where you are the king of a mountain, but you're standing up there all alone. Loyalty is the currency of the soul. If you are loyal to your values and loyal to your partner, you will leave behind a wealth that cannot be taxed and cannot be stolen. Think about that. Think about what people will say about you when you can no longer speak for yourself. Will they talk about your career, or will they talk about your kindness? Will they remember your bank account, or will they remember the way you listened? I promise you, at the end of the road, the only thing that provides any comfort is knowing you loved well. My Arthur is gone now. He's been gone for 6 years. When he passed, the house wasn't filled with his awards or his tools. It was filled with people. People he had helped, people he had forgiven, people he had encouraged when they were at their lowest. That was his legacy. It wasn't written in stone, it was written in the hearts of everyone who knew him. So, as I sit here today with this old locket, my wish for you is simple. I wish for you the courage to be vulnerable. I wish for you the strength to stay when you want to run. I wish for you to realize, before it's too late, that the most important thing you will ever build is the bridge between your heart and someone else's. Loyalty isn't just staying, it's showing up with a full heart day after day, year after year. It's a long-term investment that pays dividends in peace. When you are 80 years old and sitting in a quiet room, you won't want to look back on a life of what ifs. You'll want to look back and see a trail of light you left behind for those coming after you. Be the light. Be the person who stays. Be the legacy. Thanks for listening to An Old Soul. Subscribe, share this with someone you love, and cherish them while they are here. Life is shorter than you think, but love can make it feel eternal. Would you like me to share more stories about the early years of my marriage?